It was like that picture you got behind you. I have that same
Yeah,
picture. Hank.
you told me about Larry.
Yeah, no, but I have the same. I have a black and white version that's signed by Ali. That's literally on the other side of this wall over here in my.
I wish mine was signed by Ali.
Pretty cool.
Okay,
Anyway,
now. This is Umar Ahmed for Rafael TV in association with MTK Global. Across the pond, I'm joined by Mr. Dan Rafael. What have you been up to, Dan? How have you been keeping?
I've been keeping good. I've been busy. I've been writing, as you know. I write for Ring Magazine's website and the publication. I write for Boxing Scene. I started my own newsletter, which I'm hoping we get a little plug to for any of your viewers. The great IFL viewers can check it out at danrayfield.substack.com. It publishes several times a week, and it goes right to people's inbox. All they got to do is go there and put their email in, and it will come to their inbox magically. And I'm having a lot of fun with that, and I hope people are enjoying it so far.
Well, we'll put the kind of instruction and description.
I appreciate it.
Video, so people can subscribe to your stuff. Dan, it seems like boxing is really picking back up. Obviously, we're in this pandemic situation still, but the sport is really thriving at the moment. There's a huge announcement last weekend. That's where I want to start with Canelo-Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders. Your take on that fight?
Well, it's the right fight. It's the fight that should have happened 1 year ago now. But of course, last May, that was a fight that was made, was agreed to. The press release was written. They were about to announce it. And suddenly the pandemic had already started to sort of take hold. But I don't think people, at least in the United States, didn't really quite grasp how serious and how life-altering it was going to become until the NBA season shut down. And at that point, when that occurred, everything started to shut down. And so Golden Boy Promotions held back the announcement of the fight. They were not sure if it was going to happen. Obviously, it was supposed to go out like the next day when the NBA season shut down for several months, and the fight never happened. So now, a lot of stuff has happened between then and now. Canelo's promotional situation and his television network contract with the Zone, a lot of things have changed, but they have found their way back to each other. He's working with Eddie Hearn. They're going into their second fight of this 2-fight deal they have. And, it's a big time fight. Remember back when the fight, which should have happened last year, Canelo hadn't yet won the 2 belts that he has now that he won when he fought and handily defeated Callum Smith. So now it takes on even more, I guess, importance or significance, still the same fight, but it becomes more significant because Canelo's stated goal has been for quite some time now to become the undisputed champion in the super middleweight division. He now holds 2 of the main titles. He holds the ring title, and Billy Joe Saunders holds the WBO title, which would give Canelo the 3rd of the 4 belts. And certainly if Billy Joe wins, give him a bunch of belts to add to his collection. So it's an important fight. It's the number 1 fighter in the division in Canelo against Billy Joe, who, is arguably, if not 2, 3, 4, somewhere in that higher echelon of the weight class. And so, they're getting it on May 8th.
Of course, Billy's a big name here. Is one of the main stars in British boxing. It's been a few years since Billy was kind of exposed to a wide American audience. Obviously, I'm referring to the time he boxed on HBO against David Lemieux in Canada. What's the perception there about Billy Joe Saunders and his chances against Canelo, the perception in America?
I mean, not that I speak for everybody in America, but I think I have a pretty good read on what boxing fans have to say in my interactions via social media with so many people and reading what they have to say about these types of things. Is that, of course, and it's not a knock on Saunders, is that Canelo is the favorite. He'd be the favorite against anybody, in boxing from 160, certainly up to 168, and probably a number of guys at 175. So he's expected to win. I think that people that are familiar with Saunders understand that, he has a certain kind of style. It may not be the most appealing style to watch from an entertainment value point of view, but it's effective. He gets the job done. There is a reason why Billy Joe Saunders is undefeated still. And although his resume in recent times has really been lackluster, he does have some solid wins on his record. I think of the Andy Lee fight, for example, and there's other guys. David Lemieux was certainly a very good win. The way he did it, the fact that he went and did it, on Lemieux's turf in Quebec. But I think other American fans are familiar with Billy Joe Saunders for a positive drug test that cost him his title at middleweight. That he would have been stripped. He gave it up, and that caused the fight between him and Demetrius Andrade to be canceled. And Andrade ended up fighting a late replacement fight and winning that belt. So I do still think that there's some unfinished business between Saunders and Andre, regardless of what takes place in the fight between Billy Joe and Canelo. But I think his reputation more or less is like, good fighter, certainly worthy opponent for Canelo. Maybe not the most exciting guy, but let's see this as Canelo makes the trek towards undisputed. I'll say this though, if there's a fighter at 168 pounds that could trouble Canelo Alvarez, it's probably Billy Joe Saunders, just because of his technical boxing style. I think he has a pretty good chin. I had an interview with Oscar De La Hoya, Canelo's former promoter, earlier in the week, where among the topics we discussed was his take on what Canelo did with Yildirim over this past weekend, and he gave me his thoughts about some of the other opponents that Canelo wants to face, including guys like Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant, maybe David Benavidez, and his opinion matched mine, which is that if there's a fighter in that weight class that could give him some trouble, it's a guy like Saunders. He made the point that because he's a southpaw and he's on his toes and moves a lot, that not just Canelo, that gives problems to a lot of guys. So that was his take, but there's still a reason why Canelo is going for it, and he'll be the heavy favorite, no doubt about it.
It's a fantastic fight on May 8th, and then on May 22nd, another huge occasion for British boxing and world boxing, as Josh Taylor bids to become undisputed champion, just as Jose Ramirez does. Another fascinating fight, Dan.
Oh, I think that's a tremendous fight. Matter of fact, the random thoughts column that I wrote on my Substack newsletter that published on my time Friday afternoon was why I love that fight so much. It's everything that's right about boxing. I made the point, and it's not like I'm the only one that knows this or thinks this. Look, they're inarguably 1 and 2 in the weight class. You might say it's Jose Ramirez. Somebody else might say that it's Josh Taylor. But the thing that people are going to agree about is they're 1 and 2, whatever order you put them in. And that's the first thing. They're fighting for all 4 titles. Neither guy was looking to duck or dodge the fight. They both ran towards this fight. They both wanted the fight very much. They're both undefeated. They're both in their prime. And they have styles, I think, that will lend itself to a good fight. I mean, and when you put all that together, that's everything that's right about boxing. The best against the best at their best moment. They're not guys that were once the best who have big names who are now, beyond their best days. They're both smack dab in their primes. They're sort of, only each of them only made a few title defenses. I mean, it's if you were just sitting down and looking at all the weight classes and said, I want to make, 5 fights. I believe that most people, who follow boxing closely would say, Jose Ramirez against Josh Taylor, that's one of the top fights I want to see. And I'm thrilled that it's happening. And on top of all the positive things I just said about it, at least in the United States anyway, it's not on pay-per-view. It's regular basic cable fights. So the masses can see it instead of a more limiting audience because of pay-per-view. So that's another thing that makes it a great matchup and makes it great for the sport, because everybody can watch it. It's not going to be a secret.
Yeah, the winner of that really can break into the market and become a bit of a star.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, the winner of the fight will have a decision to make. Oftentimes, it's so hard to become undisputed. A lot of times guys do it when they do it, and then, they usually move up in weight. Terrence Crawford was the last and the only other fighter to win all 4 belts at 140 in the 4-belt era. And he did exactly that. He won those titles in his unification with Ndongo, and then he promptly vacated and went up to the welterweight division, where he then won another world title. Alexander Usyk, when he won the World Boxing Super Series a couple of years ago to become the undisputed champion in the cruiserweight division, he stuck around for one more fight and defended all 4 belts on the same night in his win against Tony Bellew over in London, I don't know if it was in London, but in England anyway. But the question will be, will Josh Taylor or Jose Ramirez, whoever comes out victorious, will they decide to stay around and take on some other guys at 140? There'll be mandatory fights to make. There's talented fighters in the lightweight division that want to move up. Teofimo Lopez, for example, has talked about post Kambosos, if he wins, trying to go up to 140 to challenge for the undisputed title. That would be a big deal to be, 2 undisputed, back-to-back big multi-belt fights for the guy, with just that mandatory in between. So I don't know if Josh Taylor wants to go up to welterweight or Jose Ramirez wants to go up. But there's going to definitely, whoever wins, there's going to be a lot of business for both guys, whether it's at 140, welcoming a 35-pounder up to 140, or themselves going up to 147. it's a good problem to have if you're either of those guys and you come out with the win.
Well, I know Josh said if he does win that fight, he'd welcome that mega fight with Teofimo Lopez if he goes up to 140. And Teofimo Lopez is someone I do want to discuss. What have you made out of they call it the fallout between him and Top Rank? What have you made of this?
I mean, it's an unfortunate situation. I didn't quite understand why the two sides went at it so badly the way they did. I mean, don't get me wrong. I understand that there's differences between promoters and management and fighters about money and purses. I've done this a long time, and I've seen my share of battle royales between promotional companies and their fighters and their managers. This one seemed highly unnecessary, it seems to me. I mean, Top Rank, for its part, has spent a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of energy, a lot of resources getting Teofimo Lopez to this position, which is now, as an emerging superstar fighter in the sport, a very exciting guy with good television ratings and burgeoning name recognition. I mean, a fighter becomes a big deal when other top fighters and ex-fighters talk about it. When Mike Tyson is talking about Teofimo Lopez, for example, you got something. So if you base it on that sort of premise, why then they would get to this point and go into a negotiation that seemed like light on the money. Now, at the Top Rank side, we'll say, look, right before the Lomachenko fight, we signed a new contract that raised his minimum substantially to $1.25 million. And so when he comes out of the victory, of course, that's where we're going to start. We just renegotiated it, a month or so before the fight. So I get that point of view. But again, you don't know how the fight's going to unfurl, how he's going to look, if he's going to win. So when Teofimo wins the fight, he sees the minimum dollar figure. The manager sees the minimum dollar figure and says, well, we're worth more than the minimum. And so instead of Top Rank throwing out a number that was not crazy, but at least more than the minimum, which would maybe give them the feeling, okay, they're not trying to get over on us. When they gave them the offer of the minimum, now you have David McWater, the Teofimo Lopez manager, who was very ticked off about that. Say, well, if you're going to give me what he viewed as an absurdly low number, I'm going to throw out an absurdly high number. So we asked for $5.5 million. And at that point, there was never any true back and forth negotiation between the sides. The communications never really picked up. And here you have a purse bid, and now you have Eddie Hearn coming in with a good quality offer, and then you have the Triller folks come in and blow everybody out of the water. Matter of fact, you could take the amount of money that Triller is paying for the fight, now add together the number that Eddie bid and the number that Top Rank bid, and it's still less money than the total amount of the Triller bid. So you've lost Teofimo for this one fight. He sees all these riches for this thing. And meanwhile, you have Top Rank and Bob Arum, who's been doing nothing but downplaying the fight, not necessarily saying bad things about Kambosos, but basically just saying, look, it's not a big fight. It's not a marquee event. It's not this, it's not that. And that's, of course, going to get the other side, kind of aggravated about it. And, it just feels like it was just handled badly, that if they could have just had a more honest negotiation about this fight, they could have got it done. Top Rank wouldn't have lost, at least for this fight, Lopez. But more importantly, it's not that big of a deal to lose the guy for one fight. A purse bid is a purse bid. That's why they're there. The fight goes to the highest bidder. It's that the bad feelings are not going to go away after the fight. And Teofimo still has, about 3 years left on the contract. Now they will claim there's breaches. Maybe there'll be a lawsuit. It's one thing to lose the fighter physically for one bout. It's a whole different matter when you lose him mentally and he doesn't want to be with you. And there's now going to be the constant bickering. You hope they can settle things and work it out and fall in love again or whatever. But knowing Top Rank's brass, knowing Bob Arum how I do, and knowing Todd the Buff how I do, and knowing Teofimo how I do, and knowing his father and David McWater, that's a tough reconciliation. I feel like that the future, if he beats Kambosos, or loses to Kambosos for that matter, it doesn't look good. I'll say that.
No one really expected Triller to bid that much for a mandatory defense fight. Do you think they're going to be a big player in the sport now? Do you expect them to stay?
I don't. I think Ryan Kavanaugh, who runs Triller and is the person behind that purse bid, has said in interviews and to different people around the business, look, we're not trying to compete with Top Rank. We're not trying to do this. We're not trying to do that. We're not trying to sign, 1 million fighters and be a big stable. We're looking to be opportunistic if we think there's something that fits into what we're trying to do. And so this goes back to what I was saying to you about what happened in the non-negotiations. Top Rank may say they value Teofimo Lopez as the athlete to their company, but they didn't value the matchup with Kambosos, and that's what led them to bid what they bid. Triller valued the opportunity to have a top champion, whoever the opponent was. Now, Kambosos is a good fighter and he's a worthy contender, but they didn't bid $6 million because of Kambosos. They bid $6 million because of Teofimo Lopez. So they held the fighter in more of a higher regard, even if it wasn't the greatest matchup on paper. And I think sometimes, when Top Rank will say, well, it's about the fight, sometimes you got to make the exception. He's your number one star in your stable, arguably. I mean, they have other talented guys, certainly Terrence Crawford and Tyson Fury. But, Fury is doing what he's doing. He's on pay-per-view. Terrence Crawford, they've had their own problems with, doesn't have any obvious opponents. So even if they, and they haven't got along great, but even if everything was good, they still struggle with opponents. With Lopez, it's a reasonable mandatory. And then beyond the mandatory, there's all kinds of opportunities that, whether it's to go up in weight, whether it's stay at 135, whether it's to bring up a guy from the lower weight division. The point is there's guys from the fight. And he's also, again, nothing against Crawford. He's a great fighter also. Teofimo Lopez is like 23, 24 years old. Crawford's 33. It's not like I'm not saying Crawford's retiring tomorrow, but Lopez seems to have more good years ahead of him than Crawford. So why that bridge would get burned? But Triller valued Teofimo Lopez. Forget about the match. They think they can do something, and and if you look at the track record, which is granted, I'll say is small, but they did a heck of a job in generating publicity for their exhibition match between Roy Jones and Mike Tyson that took place last fall. Now, look, we know that this is not on that level. Teofimo Lopez is not Mike Tyson or Roy Jones for that matter. But they showed that they can put on a good production. It was a good pay-per-view to watch. They put on a good undercard. The production values of the broadcast were very, very good, and they got a lot of media out of it. So, I think they might be able to make hay. But I don't think they're in this for the long haul where they're going to start suddenly sign this guy, that guy. If a fight comes to a purse bid that's interesting, with somebody that makes sense, then I think they might go for it. But the thing about it is, Umar, not too often in boxing does a fight with a fighter of the caliber of Lopez with that name and sort of excitement that surrounds him, they usually don't get to a purse bid. They usually get the deal made. This was unusual. This was not usually purse bid is, fighter and promoter, can't agree on the money with the other side's fighter and promoter. This was not that. This was not that Top Rank and Lopez couldn't agree on the money with Lou DiBella, the promoter for Kambosos, and Kambosos' management team, Peter Kahn, and the fighter. This was a strictly in-house problem between Top Rank and Teofimo. So that's why the purse bid occurred. So I don't think you're going to see too many big names wind up at purse bid, in the coming, it's just unusual. It doesn't happen too often.
No, I think you're right. It's a unique situation. Dan, Frank Warren, Eddie Earn, Bob Arum, all within the last 2 days have come on IFL and said that there are no issues, no obstacles regarding this fight with Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. What have you heard from them guys or anything about this fight?
Well, I mean, if all the sides involved are saying that's the case, there's no reason not to believe them. I will say, something that I wrote probably about a week ago was, and this was sort of in my mind, was sort of a significant situation in the context of an overall negotiation for a very big and tough fight to make, is that they had finally gotten to the point where they had exchanged like actual contracts, and what that means is, okay, we've agreed on all of the major points, probably the minor points, because it's all now in the paper. And so now the idea is everything that we've agreed to, or we think we've agreed to, gets memorialized in a document. And at that point, each side gets to read it. The lawyers take a look at it. They make changes to the language, but the terms are agreed to. And so it gets to a point where, that takes some time, but it doesn't take forever. It takes a few days, maybe a week, for everybody to go back and forth and make their points about what language they think needs to have changes, or, refine this or tweak that. But it feels like, from what the promoters are saying, that exercise has occurred, and now they're in agreement. And so I would think if all three sides, meaning the two promoters for Tyson as well as for Anthony Joshua, that at this point they would get that final contract, have the changes reflected, get the new documents, read through, and sign away, and we should have a fight. I mean, it sounds like it's going to happen. I mean, it's a huge fight for boxing, and it'll be the first undisputed champion in the four belt era, and it's a big freaking deal.
Absolutely. Just to finish off, a bit of a left field topic, this one. What do you think about Jake Paul fighting Tommy Fury?
Is that happening?
Nothing concrete at the moment, but it could be on the card. Frank Warren, who obviously promotes Tommy Fury, has come out and said he'd be 100% on that.
I mean, if they make that, I mean, good for them. I guess they'll get paid a good amount of money. But honestly, I can say a curse word on IFL, right?
That's the whole point.
I couldn't give a shit about that fight one way or the other. If it happens, I couldn't care less. If it doesn't happen, I care even less. I have zero interest in that. You know, if that's something, if you need a sideshow fight like that to help bring in an audience for Tyson Fury against Anthony Joshua for the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world, then boxing has problems. You don't need that just sideshow to help bring in any dollars or people, because the main event, I mean, yes, always the main event is what is supposed to sell the show. But you and I have been doing this long enough to know sometimes you have a main event that's maybe a little soft or not so great. You got to kind of spruce it up a little bit and bring in something that's going to maybe, more appeal to, a different audience or bring people in. This is not that fight. You don't need that crap on this card. You want to.
I don't think it's being touted for that card though, Dan. I think it's just a separate thing they're looking at.
Okay, so if it's a separate thing, again, I still couldn't care less with it. Again, I have nothing bad to say about Tommy Fury. I got nothing bad to say about Jake Paul. I just don't give a shit.
Fair enough. I think there's a lot of people in that bracket as well, to be honest.
I mean, good for them. I say this all the time. I mean, if people ask me all the time, what do you think about these celebrity fights, the YouTube guys fighting with each other? I'm like, it's not my thing. But if they can make money and people want to see it, I mean, who am I to argue? Good for them. My preference would be for not to, filthy up my real boxing shows. But if they want to do it, that's cool. I don't have to write about it. I don't have to talk about it. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to, get too involved in it. I mean, we're talking about it right now, I guess, but because I'm asked my opinion about it. But again, I wish those guys the best. They still got to train. They still going to get punched, and hopefully they can make money. But it's just, I like real boxing matches between real fighters and, and guys that mean something. And I'm kind of surprised that they would go that route. I mean, I thought that, that Tommy Fury might, have a future in the sport, and it seems a little too early to start going on the sideshow route.
Well, no, to be honest, in fact, I'll say it now. He did an interview with me after his last fight on the weekend, post-fight, and the name Jake Paul was brought up, and he actually asked me to cut out the video. At this point, there was nothing going on. He didn't really want to talk about Jake Paul or anything like that. But a couple of days later, Jake Paul happened to call Tommy Fury out, and it's all kind of sprung off from there. Tommy didn't want to go down that route, I'll just say.
Don't we have some real fights we could talk about?
I think, Dan, to be honest, I think we're still in a lockdown here. We're all bored, and Jake Paul's dominating our timeline. So it's a bit of a thing going on. I think once we're back out of this and we're back at shows, etc., I think it might be.
Hey, we could talk about his brother Logan Paul and the Mayweather fight getting rescheduled at some point.
To be honest, I don't know what's happened with that. I don't know what's happened.
That's another one I couldn't care less about.
Okay, Dan, appreciate your time here at IFL TV. I will put that thing in the description, 100%, and we'll catch up soon. All right, take care.
All right, great, Omar. Always a pleasure to be on with you, my man. Appreciate it.
Top man.